Welcome, everyone. We are Lumen, and I'm here with Philip today to talk about strategic planning. We are Lumen, and we build leaders and teams while training in continuous innovation. I'm your host, Kat, and welcome, Philip.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, me too. You know, over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking to our viewers and our followers about their strategic planning sessions. We've been offering a simple 6-step toolkit for planning with purpose and passion, but also making sure you get that portfolio of milestones and OKRs. And this, over the next couple of months, we want to dive in a little bit deeper and expand on that toolkit. So can you help us understand what we're going to be doing over the next couple of months and how that fits in with what we've been talking about?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. Actually, the steps are pretty much the same or very overlapping, as you'll see if we go a little bit into detail of what we're talking about today. And what we're going to do today is to really take a step back for a moment. Like the 6 steps of strategic planning, they totally make sense. Those are more meaningful steps, right? We start, for example, with connecting to your team and actually making sure that you have coherent people in the room that are actually planning together. And then the next 4 steps are actually the first 4 steps of this process as well. And the reason why I wanted to kind of take a step back today is to really show how that fits into the bigger picture, because the world of planning has changed a little bit in terms of how it used to be and how it is now.
Absolutely, yeah. And we would love to hear from our viewers and our followers about how you're thinking about strategic planning, what problems you're running into and how you're tackling them. And then today we also want to give our insights to what we've been seeing. So yeah, let's talk about strategic planning in the past and how is it different now, Philip?
Sure. I mean, coming back to that, key question of, how do you create a coherent strategic plan for the future when kind of things around you seem uncertain, right? And this is what for a lot of people seems to have changed this year, right? Because in a way, when you looked at planning in the past, we've had this situation of relative certainty, right? We've had this luxury that in the last 50, 60 years, for the most part, at least in this small portion of the Western world we're talking about here, right? Because obviously in the rest of the world, there's plenty of uncertainty and plenty of unrest and plenty of things that have been going on continuously, right? And we've been living this beautiful illusion that everything is sort of relatively stable. There's some innovation stuff that you should keep tabs on over here, right? Like maybe buy a couple of startups every now and then, to keep relevant. But we've had this relative certainty where we've actually been able to extrapolate from the past. Right, we've actually been able to look at our P&L from last year, at our budget from last year, and say, okay, this is probably going to be the same, roughly, maybe a couple % more or less here or there, right? Maybe we'll have a cost out initiative where like, okay, shit, I need to, cut some money here. Where do I do that? But it's been very much based on planning from the experience that you've had, right? And really looking backward and saying, okay, this is how things have been, with some assumption of a little bit of change. It's probably going to go forward like this. Right? And I think what for many people this year became clear was to say that we have a whole new situation, right? Because instead of relative certainty, what we've come to see is the reality of relative uncertainty, right? That we live in uncertainty all the time in some ways, right? We think we're really safe in our mind and how our brain works even, right? We just assume naturally that tomorrow is kind of going to be a little bit like today. And that's actually true, right? But it's still that shuttle shift from assuming that there's a certainty to assuming that there's relative uncertainty and that I'm actually managing the probability. Is this where we go, and you begin to extrapolate from the future and say, if I want to do this, what needs to be happening now, right? And really planning based on vision and testing, right? Where you essentially, instead of saying, hey, this is how it's been, to say, wow, this is where I'd like to go. This is what I'd like to see in the future. This is the kind of reality I would like to make happen, right? And how can I begin to test my way towards that, right? How can I take steps that are controlled in the sense that I'm managing probabilities, right? Where I don't have actual control. I can just shift for something to be more likely or less likely, right? So it's really where planning is meant to be in the first place, right? Because planning is about the future, right? And it's kind of a perversion that we've had the luxury in a way to extrapolate from the past instead of really asking ourselves, what kind of future do we want to build? And especially in today's world, when we look around, there's all these mega trends, right? AI and climate and COVID and this and that. And it's easy to just react to that, right? and contract and be reactive around it and just try and do something and try and be as normal as possible, rather than actually using this opportunity to say, cool, awesome, things are a little bit up in the air. What do we want to create now? Right? And it's really about, when we go back to this question of how can you create a plan for the future when everything has changed and is uncertain, it's really about unknown problems, right? Uncertainty means I don't know yet, right? I don't know what's necessarily coming, right? And how do I solve for unknowns? Well, that's what innovation is all about, right? And this brings me back a little bit to the initial piece of why do we take our framework for innovation and say this really makes sense for strategic planning, right? We've developed this framework. We use it in a lot of the work we do with teams, where we come up from the first idea to how do I bring something in actuality and how do I make something real. We base these steps on a variety of things, from ancient wisdom about how things are being created, all the way to modern, innovation methods and some of the, insights even from neuroscience that we brought in here. And we said, you know what, if I need to come up with something new and deal with unknown problems, like I do in strategic planning now, it really makes sense to actually go use the 7 steps for strategic planning as well, right? And we're going to, obviously in our workshops, we take teams through that, right, whole process. And I just want to give you a little bit of a quick overview here today of what these 7 steps are, right? And it's really starting with signal, right? Really going back, instead of starting with, oh, this is what it's been, to say, what do we see out there, right? What is new? What is exciting to us? What are problems that we want to solve? Right? And the problems that you want to solve, ultimately, that signal gives you your purpose, right? So this is step 2 in a normal strategic planning, right? When we said step 1 was connecting to the team, here's actually the first step where you say, what's out there? What do we see? What matters to us, right? And then to go, okay, with all these factors, if I look at all of them, what are sort of my scenarios, right? What's the worst case scenario? If everything really goes down the dumpster, what would it look like, right? And plan for that, or create a vision of that and say, here's that scenario, right? Then you have a scenario for kind of okay, and we're just kind of making it happen, right? And then you want to create a scenario that is super exciting and assumes that you're really making it happen, you're rocking it, you're creating the best version of what could be out there, right? And you want to make that your vision, right? And really wrap that into an emotional narrative that excites your people, because that's really what you're working towards creating with your strategic plan. And the strategic plan is just then the next step where you look at, okay, what's the model? What are all the things that need to exist in the world, right, for this vision to be true, right? And what are some of the things I need to test to see if I can make this vision happen, right? What are the things that now I'm running controlled experiments, right? It's not about innovation. It's not about random risk, like some people think it's like, oh, let's go just come up with some crazy idea and build a unicorn, right? But it's actually about scientific experiments, really, to say, hey, here's all these assumptions that I have about the future and what could happen and what could be. Let's figure out which ones are most critical and which ones can I test and turn into hypotheses, and find some way of easy, cheap way of testing it as quickly as possible, so I don't go down the drain, down the path for a long time before actually noticing what's happening. Right, so really coming up with a clear portfolio here. This was our first step in our original 6-step model, right? And then going into commitments and really saying, what are the indicators? What are the solid agreements I need to make this happen? And what are the agreements and commitments we are making with each other around what we want to move, right? What are the different metrics that we want to actually really impact, right? And that's now where we go into progress measures, that are much more, in a way, helpful than goals, right? Because a goal you might reach, and pardon the sound in the background there if you're hearing that, but it's the reality of living in shared spaces
Exactly.
these days,
Yeah.
right?
We got to stay dynamic,
You gotta stay dynamic, right? But yeah, so the progress indicators are really about having numbers, right? Did you measure yourself by all the time? Not like at the end of next year, did you reach your budget or not? Did you make it happen or not? But to say, hey, are we on the right track? Are we tracking where we want to go? Right? Are we doing this? Are we actually making our vision a reality? Right, and this is where typically strategic planning in a way has started, right? Because you got your KPIs, you got your progress indicators, and so here, make this happen. And then you actually build out your plan, which is these next couple of steps, right? Where really when I now go, that I have these things, go really build out the plan, because now I can go back, and this is the beauty of this model, it's meant to be recursive. Now I can go back to each item on my portfolio, here, right? And for each item on my portfolio, I can now go do these same steps again and say, hey, this event, what's the purpose of that, right? What's the vision for this? What does it look like when it's done? What's our ideal scenario? And then what are the steps to make that happen? Right? And then you can go continue to iterate through these steps until you're really at a level of detail that is meaningful and that also is actionable for you, right? Where on the one hand, it's big enough to inspire you and to say, cool, this is my next challenge. And at the same time, there's that sense of competence, right? We've talked in the past about even intrinsic motivation, right? And how you need those different factors, like I need to actually be able to make that happen too, right? There has to be some level of competence, but a stretch goal, right? Something bigger than yourself. And then once you have all that, then you can figure out what is it going to take to make that happen, right? What money do I need? What resources do I need? What material, all that stuff that I now typically have in a plan in terms of your ask, right? Because you're going to have to go to someone in all likelihood, unless you're very, very top. But even then you have to go to shareholders or the bank or somebody to say, okay, cool, here guys, this is what I got. This is what I'm going to need to make this happen. And then you can launch it and really launch it with, excitement, with celebration, with also, immediately going in iterations so that you know that you can continue to revise your plan as you go. Right? And this is really the point of why it makes sense to go back to innovation as a tool for managing unknowns, right? And because innovation is in and not just about creating the future. And your strategic plan is simply the steps you're going to take and the pieces that you need in order to make that real.
So a quick recap. What I'm hearing you say is that first and foremost, we need to not get stuck in the past, utilize the past as a way of a learning tool, but also incorporate our vision of what could be. And that's why we really start with purpose and vision instead of just going straight to, okay, what are our OKRs going to be? What financing do we need? Let's first ground in where do we want to go? Who do we need to be in order to get there? And then we can go through those final steps of, who do we have to pitch to? How are we going to connect to them? What are the measurements that we have? What are the milestones? And when are we going to launch this thing? But I'm really hearing this piece around having a vision and having a purpose and starting from a united team, a connected front, before even going into the numbers and the milestones and all of that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end, it's starting about, purpose and people, right? Really to think about,
Right.
and in the end, you're inspiring people to do something new in the world, right? Whatever your business is, you're affecting how we live in the world. And so to go back and take that step, and then it also just alleviates that stress, right? It's so easy to be reactive with all the ocean, and I have to do strategic planning, and it can be a really stressful experience for people. And so I hope that today gave you a bit of a step back to say, hey, you know what, this is okay. We are creating the future, and let's take that first step and start with why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important takeaway from this particular video is start with asking the question why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Where do I want to go? And who do I have to be to get there?
Beautifully said. So, and that's
Nice.
we will help people with that. Obviously, we just give you a very quick overview here. But this is what we do and love to do with people, because it's our purpose to inspire other people with their purpose. And then really while doing that and while doing this work, teaching people how to connect to themselves and each other in a new way so that you really get bright people, because we believe that, bright people create a bright future. So if we can support you in your efforts, of course, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Philip. This is really fun. I love being on video with you. And thanks to everyone who is out there watching. Let us know how you are handling your strategic plan. Let us know if we can help you, if you have any questions. Feel free to download our 6-step toolkit. You can find that at lumen.io/strategic dash planning. You can also find us on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. And if you're getting value out of this video, please hit our like button. And we hope to see you again soon.